Ron Howard is widely regarded as a beloved figure in Hollywood. It's rare to find anyone who harbors resentment toward him. However, there was one person who managed to seriously upset Ron, enough to earn his seldom-seen animosity. Ronald William Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, to Gene Spiegel and Rance Howard. With a family lineage that includes German, English, Scottish, Irish, and Dutch roots, it's no surprise that Rance's original surname was Beckenholt. In 1948, as he entered the entertainment world, Rance decided to change it to Howard. Rance wore many hats: actor, writer, and director, while Gene also pursued acting. Growing up as the eldest child in a showbiz family, it was almost inevitable that Ron would follow a similar path. When Ron was born, Rance was in the midst of a 3-year stint with the United States Air Force. Ron's early education happened right on the set of The Andy Griffith Show, filmed at the Desilu Studios. He later attended Robert Louis Stevenson Elementary School and then David Starr Jordan Junior High. Eventually, on his father's recommendation, he enrolled at Burroughs High School, a public school where he completed his education. It was during this time that Ron developed an interest in filmmaking. He would carry around a Super 8 camera and ask crew members questions about directing while visiting sets, showing an eagerness well beyond his years. Although he was accepted into the USC School of Cinematic Arts, he never completed his degree. Howard began acting at an incredibly young age. In his own words, "I was involved before I ever thought about it. If they needed a baby in a play, I was the baby. I didn't have a choice." By age 4, he was actively performing and loving it. His first film role came at just 18 months old in the 1956 movie Frontier Woman. By the age of 2, he was making stage appearances, including in The 7-Year Itch. Soon, he was landing roles in various television shows, and in 1959, he appeared in The Journey alongside acting heavyweights like Yul Brynner, Deborah Kerr, and Jason Robards. Ron credited his father for recognizing his talent and guiding him. Rance, a naturally skilled teacher, focused not just on performance but on the craft of acting, helping Ron understand scenes on a deeper level. After returning from Europe, the family drove to Los Angeles in their old Plymouth. Rance arranged a meeting with his agent and said, "Let's just see where this goes." Ron's early gigs were in live TV, and thanks to his father's preparation, he performed with confidence, earning notice from casting agents and working steadily that year. That momentum led to Ron's iconic casting as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Before that, he had already appeared in The DuPont Show with June Allison, the Twilight Zone episode Walking Distance, Dennis the Menace as Dennis's friend Stuart, and several early episodes of The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. He also had an uncredited role in the 1960 episode The Counterfeit Gun of Cheyenne. His performance in The Journey landed him a spot on Playhouse 90, where producer Sheldon Leonard recognized his potential and cast him in The Andy Griffith Show. That series, which starred Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, Francis Bavier, and Jim Nabors, would make Ron a household name. One memorable scene shows young Opie tossing a rock into the peaceful waters of Myers Lake. But what viewers didn't see was that the lake was actually Franklin Canyon Lake in California. At 6 years old, Ron couldn't throw the rock far enough. In his memoir, The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family, Ron reveals that he mimed the throw while a crew member, hidden behind a tree, actually hurled the stone. Though it seems idyllic, growing up on a television set was far from a fairy tale. Ron learned early on how to pretend for the camera and was also exposed to the often harsh realities of adult life. In the memoir he co-authored with his brother, Clint, the pair praised their parents, Rance and Gene, for keeping them grounded in a world that could easily consume child actors. Their parents weren't stage parents. They were genuinely protective out of love and concern, not greed. This was vital because the atmosphere on set could be rough. The Desilu Studios crew were colorful characters, heavy drinkers with coarse language. Ron recalled that the show's star would often be drunk by lunchtime. Smoking was commonplace, and health consciousness was nearly non-existent. Ron remembered having irritated eyes constantly due to the smoke-filled environment. Even the studio bathroom was a jarring education. He was puzzled by the obscene, anatomically detailed graffiti. His dad tried to explain gently, "Some men, when they sit on the toilet, like to draw penises," and added firmly that Ron should never do such things. There were other behind-the-scenes challenges too. In scenes requiring him to eat ice cream, Ron was actually given cold, mashed potatoes, since real ice cream melted quickly under the hot studio lights. Despite the challenges, the crew treated Ron with care and respect. But that same kindness wasn't extended to Jim Neighbors, the actor who played Gomer Pyle. Although Jim's sexuality was an open secret, he was cruelly mocked behind his back. Ron recalled hearing people refer to him with slurs like homo, without any compassion or decency. As a young boy, Ron was exposed to far more than most kids his age, learning hard truths about life, both good and bad, before he even hit adolescence. For instance, Ron Howard was well aware that Andy Griffith, who played his on-screen father, Sheriff Taylor, was a kind and generous man. Still, both Andy and his co-star Don Knotts were grappling with troubled marriages at the time. The two had become close friends after meeting on Broadway during the 1955 production of No Time for Sergeants. They frequently spoke with each other on set, often within earshot of young Howard. Howard remembered overhearing conversations where both actors discussed their therapy sessions. Andy once told Don that his psychologist had raised the issue of latent homosexuality. He also shared that his doctor had advised him to work longer hours on the show to avoid returning home to his wife. Ron Howard even recalled witnessing Andy in real distress, such as the time he returned from Christmas break with a bandaged hand, explaining he'd gotten drunk, angry, and punched a door. Meanwhile, Howard faced his own difficulties during his time on The Andy Griffith Show. Playing Opie caused him to be relentlessly bullied at school. Kids teased him because Opie rhymed with names like Dopey, Mopey, and Soapy. The bullying made him so fearful that he avoided using the school bathroom altogether, which tragically led to him wetting his pants in public one day. Though deeply embarrassed, his parents encouraged him to endure the torment until the end of the school year. Howard later said that it was a tough period that led to fights, but eventually, he made friends. The challenges forced him to mature more quickly than his peers, but they also left him with some lasting regrets. Despite the emotional toll, Howard also witnessed incredible kindness. He remembered how actor Howard McNear, who played Floyd the Barber, suffered a serious stroke in the third season. Rather than let him go, Andy Griffith insisted on keeping him on the show. The production team ingeniously devised hidden supports to help McNear stand during his scenes so he could continue working. These acts of compassion left a deep mark on young Howard. He once said, "I will forever owe a debt to Opie Taylor. Playing that role and walking a mile in his kids defined my early life." One particularly memorable episode was the pickle story. In it, Aunt Bee makes dozens of homemade pickles that everyone secretly finds revolting. Some even say they taste like kerosene. To spare her feelings, the characters pretend to enjoy them. Ironically, Howard genuinely hated pickles in real life, which made the scenes especially difficult for him. He later admitted, "Biting into those pickles was torture. It wasn't acting when I winced and frowned. That part was real. The acting came in pretending to like them." Despite its nostalgic tone and portrayal of a bygone era, The Andy Griffith Show received critical acclaim. It was nominated several times for the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Comedy Series, though it lost to The Jack Benny Show in 1961, The Bob Newhart Show in 1962, and The Monkees in 1967. Howard's time on the show opened many doors. He was cast in the film adaptation of The Music Man, based on Meredith Willson's 1957 musical. In it, he played Winthrop Peru, a shy child with a lisp, sharing the screen with Robert Preston, Shirley Jones, and Buddy Hackett. Directed by Morton DaCosta, who had also helmed Auntie Mame, the film was a major success and became the third highest-grossing movie of the year. It received 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. Howard's acting career continued to flourish. In 1963, he co-starred with Glenn Ford and Shirley Jones in The Courtship of Eddie's Father. He also appeared in episode 12 of the first season of The Big Valley and played Barry Stewart on The 11th Hour in 1965. He had a role in the 1966 episode Little Boy Lost on I Spy, and in 1969, he featured in Disney's The Story and Song from the Haunted Mansion. In a Land of the Giants episode, he portrayed a boy whose father was shot by Daniel Boone. Then, in 1971 and 1972, he appeared in The Bold Ones as a teenage tennis player battling an illness. He also acted alongside Henry Fonda in The Smith Family, where Fonda, who played his father, became a mentor and supporter of his career ambitions. Howard took on the role of an underage Marine in a 1973 MASH episode titled Sometimes You Hear the Bullet. The following year, he played Seth Turner, a guest role in the Waltons episode The Gift, which also featured his real-life father, Rance Howard, portraying Dr. McIver. Ron Howard steadily advanced in his acting career, eventually landing the role of Steve Bolander in George Lucas's iconic film American Graffiti, released in 1974. The movie helped spark a wave of 1950s nostalgia and directly inspired the hit sitcom Happy Days, where Howard starred alongside Richard Dreyfuss, Charles Martin Smith, and Harrison Ford. His portrayal of Richie Cunningham won him widespread acclaim and made him a household name. The film itself received critical praise, with Chicago Sun-Times critic Roger Ebert awarding it 4 stars. Ebert called American Graffiti not only a brilliant film but also a masterclass in historical fiction, capturing a cultural moment with a level of authenticity no sociological study could replicate. Howard would return to his role in the 1979 sequel, More American Graffiti. Although his performance was well received, it did little to rekindle his passion for acting. Instead, his sights were already set on becoming a filmmaker. In fact, his time on Happy Days, despite the show's success, only reinforced that desire. The irony wasn't lost on him. While Happy Days projected joy and lightheartedness, Howard's own experience on set was anything but cheerful. He revealed in interviews that he often felt undervalued, especially after his co-star Henry Winkler's character, Fonzie, became a breakout star. Originally, the show revolved around Richie Cunningham, Howard's character. But as Fonzie's popularity skyrocketed, Howard noticed a shift in how he was treated by the network and studio executives. Howard described it as a strange, paradoxical situation. He never questioned Winkler's talent, acknowledging that he was magnetic right from the beginning, but admitted that the rising prominence of Fonzie changed the dynamics behind the scenes. He recounted how the executives and producers began sidelining him, showing him less respect, both professionally and personally. Still, Howard advocated for his role, often reminding those involved that Richie had been the show's original lead. When the cast would go on publicity tours, it became clear just how much the fans adored Fonzie. He recalled how overwhelming it was, with reporters constantly asking whether he felt like a second-class citizen on his own show. Despite the challenges, his friendship with Winkler remained unaffected. Howard emphasized that their bond stayed strong, noting that Winkler is the godfather to all 4 of his children. Reflecting on that chapter of his life, Howard admitted it was one of his most disheartening experiences, but also one of the most formative. His years on Happy Days ultimately deepened his understanding of the entertainment industry. Though he'd long envisioned a future in directing, the lessons he learned on that set helped prepare him for the challenges ahead. It made me realize how important it was to take control of my own creative path, Howard said. I didn't just want to be part of the story, I wanted to be the one telling it. In an interview, Ron Howard shared how his passion for directing began at the age of 10. While working on The Andy Griffith Show, a director once told young Howard, "I see the way you're watching the camera and following rehearsals even when you're not in the scene. I think you're going to be a director someday." Those words struck a chord. From that moment on, Howard became fascinated with the filmmaking process. By the time he was 12, he had already fallen in love with movies like The Graduate, Romeo and Juliet, and Bonnie and Clyde. For Howard, these films marked a cinematic revolution, an exciting world beyond the traditional half-hour sitcoms he was used to. He began to understand that behind every great film was a director shaping the story. That's the role he wanted to play. While still starring in Happy Days, Howard experimented with directing a few episodes. However, Hollywood wasn't eager to hand the reins to a 23-year-old newcomer. Studios were hesitant to trust a novice with a full-length film. Around this same period, in 1975, Howard married his high school sweetheart, Cheryl Alley. A year later, he appeared in The Shootist, John Wayne's final film, sharing the screen with legends like Wayne and Lauren Bacall. In 1980, Howard officially left Happy Days during its 8th season to pursue directing full-time, though he made a brief return in the show's 11th season. Transitioning to directing was no small feat. At the time, acting and directing were seen as separate lanes, rarely crossed. Although he had been accepted into USC's first freshman class for film school, his studies were cut short when he was cast in Happy Days. Undeterred, he began creating short films on his own, gradually tackling more complex projects using rented equipment and small crews on weekends. He also began writing screenplays, sometimes collaborating with his father, Rance Howard, who was a writer himself. One of Howard's early breaks came when he struck a deal with famed producer Roger Corman. In exchange for starring in Corman's 1976 film Eat My Dust, Howard would be given the chance to direct his own feature. Corman, known for taking risks on young talent like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, agreed. In a bold move, Corman booked Howard's film, titled Grand Theft Auto, into theaters before a script had even been written. With the clock ticking, Howard teamed up with his father, and together they completed a screenplay within 2 weeks. Production began immediately. The result was a surprise hit, establishing Howard as a credible director. His success with Grand Theft Auto opened doors, leading to Night Shift, a comedy starring his Happy Days co-star Henry Winkler. As his directing career gained traction, Howard co-founded Imagine Entertainment with producer Brian Grazer. By 1983, the duo had signed a 3-year deal with NBC and began producing various programs. While Howard had once been typecast as the clean-cut all-American boy, he now found himself boxed in as a comedy director. His first attempt to break out of that mold came with Willow, a fantasy adventure produced by George Lucas. Howard continued exploring the comedy and fantasy genres with major successes like Splash and Cocoon. Splash, in particular, launched a long-standing partnership with actor Tom Hanks. Since 1986, Howard's films have been released under the Imagine Entertainment banner, allowing him greater creative freedom. He followed his comedic hits with more grounded works like Parenthood and The Paper, before transitioning into more serious territory. His 1991 film Backdraft offered a gritty, action-packed look at the lives of Chicago firefighters. In 1995, he directed Apollo 13, a gripping portrayal of NASA's failed 1970 moon mission. The film earned him the Directors Guild of America Award for Best Director and further solidified his reputation in Hollywood. Howard, once a child actor, had officially become one of the industry's leading filmmakers. He expanded his resume with family favorites like Kindergarten Cop and My Girl, and continued to direct acclaimed films such as A Beautiful Mind, The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and Cocoon. A Beautiful Mind swept the Oscars in 2002, winning 4 awards including Best Picture and Best Director for Howard himself. His directorial talents continued to impress with the success of Frost-Nixon, a compelling adaptation of the famed televised interviews between Richard Nixon and journalist David Frost. Since founding Imagine, Howard has served as its co-chairman. The company has produced numerous successful television shows, including Felicity, Arrested Development, Friday Night Lights, and 24. In later years, Howard explored a mix of genres, directing the comedy The Dilemma, the racing drama Rush, and the seafaring epic In the Heart of the Sea. In 2016, he released the documentary The Beatles, 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, a deep dive into the legendary band's early career, produced in partnership with Hulu. The following year, Howard stepped in to direct Solo, a Star Wars story, reconnecting with the Star Wars universe and creator George Lucas, his longtime friend and collaborator since American Graffiti in 1973. Today, Ron Howard resides in Greenwich, Connecticut with his wife Cheryl. The couple shares 4 adult children and a growing number of grandchildren. From child star to award-winning filmmaker, Howard's journey remains one of the most impressive transformations in Hollywood history.